Hello, I'm Jay from Volunteer Audio, and today we're making a video to show you step by step how to install a system on a Tri Glide. This specifically is a 2025 Tri Glide. They're going to be the same from 2014 all the way up to 2025. In this series, we're going to be doing 6 speakers. We're going to be doing a V2 Soundstream radio. We're going to be doing the Hertz SP4.900 in the fairing, and we're going to be replacing the upper fairing speakers. We're going to be adding lower speakers, and we're going to be doing Turpack speakers. We're also installing Soundskins on the speaker pods. So we're going to be covering pretty much every option you could add to this bike in what I would call our ultimate audio system with Hertz speakers, amp, and the best radio we offer. So watch along. I'm going to show you step by step every secret, every tip, every trick. I'm going to show you why Volunteer Audio does plug and play better than anybody else, and we're going to show you just how easy it is as we do the hard parts before we even start by setting your amp, perfectly wiring it, making sure it's all plug and play, including the radio is fully up to date, the Maestro is programmed. We'll go over all that and more as we show you how to put this system in your Tri Glide. All right, so the first step of every install is to protect the bikes, especially this front fender. This is a new bike. It has no dents in the fender, and we're going to make sure of that by putting a fender protector over the front. You never know when you're going to drop maybe a screw or a screwdriver as you're taking it apart, and you definitely don't want to damage anything. I'm going to grab a T25 Torx and an Allen head, and we're going to start taking the fairing off. All right, so one of the first things I want you to do is get a bolt organized or a clear tray of some sort to put all your hardware in. So at the end, when all those bolts are back in the bike, you know you're done. All of them that you take out have to go back in. The other thing, being this is a Tri Glide, it's got these front driving lights. We're going to rotate those to the side just to give a little bit more clearance as we take our fairing off. They're a little tight, but you can definitely spin them around. On the front of this bike, it's already got some nice trim and a custom dynamics light. You're going to need a 5/32 Allen. Most of these bikes are going to take a T25 Torx, which is also what we're going to use on the other bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and start up here. I'm going to remove the outer bolts. I'm going to loosen the middle one. We'll take it all the way out last. So here's our Allen shiny trim bolts. We're going to go ahead and remove those. I'm just going to go ahead and come out just far enough to remove that windshield. All right, so now we're going to take our T25 Torx. We're going to remove the bolts on the side. There's going to be a longer one at the top, a shorter one at the bottom. This is going to be important because if you put the long one back in the bottom hole, you can actually go out far enough that you damage the paint on the fairing. You definitely don't want to do that. So let's remove both of these. And again, you'll see there are 2 different lengths. That short one is going to go at the bottom when we go back together. Same thing on the other side. All right, so before I take this top bolt out, I want to actually show you something. Look down at where the fairing meets up to this radio. From the factory, there's actually a gap between the radio and the inner fairing. That is normal. You're going to be looking at this at the end after you've put your new radio in. You're going to be questioning why that gap's there. It was already there. All right, again, short bolt at the bottom, long bolt at the top. Just want to reinforce that because I hate to see anybody damage their bike trying to make it better. So you want to make sure those go back in the right place. This bike has a lot of custom dynamics lights, which means as we take this off, we're going to have to unplug quite a few electrical connectors. Robbie's going to help me with that, unplugging all the ones that are in here. We'll plug those back up at the end, and we'll do a little bit of wire management to make that look better after we get our amp in place. Most of you that don't have all these lights already are simply going to unplug the headlight. All right, so we're going to set this over to the side. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue disassembly in the fairing. So we're going to remove the 2, they're actually a T27, but my T25 is going to work fine to get the bolts on each side of this upper vent. Removing those. Once you've got those bolts out, you can simply slide this back and it'll release and come off. Now I can retrieve the little bolt I just dropped. All right, we got quite a bit added on here. Somebody's added the wired headset and the WIM to this bike. This was not a CVO, so it definitely was added on. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing some of those parts. We're not going to have a CB on this bike, and it doesn't look like he was using it because he's got a CB antenna ran, but no CB in here. And the WIM, the wireless headset interface module's very, very limited in what it'll do. It'll only work with the Harley branded Cena headsets correctly. Now that we're going to have the V2 radio, any wireless headset can be connected. We're not going to be limited to one specific brand. So I'm unbolting the WIM. That's going to create some more room later on. And since it's not going to be used in this install moving forward, we're going to use that room for wire management and other things that we can do. That's going to stay out of there. Now we're going to take this excess wire that they've bundled up and remove it out of the fairing. That was the wiring for that WIM that we're not going to put back in. All right, so now I'm going to continue on removing some of the wiring up here. He's got a hidden antenna. This has been added as well. It's not factory. Most of you are just going to have this factory lead that connected into your radio. But I'm going to go ahead and unplug this antenna. It's a little bit tough to get that button pushed sometimes. All right, so there's a little button here. You got to push down enough that it releases this side, and then you got to slide it out. So I'm going to just take and lift this up, just kind of out of my way, because I'm going to be removing this upper tray so we can remove the radio and get down to the bolts it's going to take to remove these upper speaker pods. There's also some other stuff going on. Somebody's duct taped the hidden antenna on. Again, you're probably not going to have this on your bike. It's not common to see a duct taped on antenna, but you know, we tried to find a new bike that had very little done to it to give you the best possible scenario on what it should look like in your fairing. These are surprises you may run into as well. Now we got our antenna loose. I'll start trying to actually fish and get it out of here. We'll be putting it back in at the end of our install. We're also adding satellite radio to the V2 radio, so we'll go over that later as well. All right, speaking of which, this factory GTS radio had Sirius XM. We're just going to unplug that antenna. And we're going to set it aside. I actually may reuse this antenna for our install with just a satellite antenna adapter. I like the shortness of the factory antenna. All right, somebody has added some additional wiring here. And I'm going to follow up and unplug, because we'll clean this up as we go back together. Your bike probably won't have this wrapped around this. All right, so you're going to have some accessory connectors that may be attached to the top, right above the radio on this tray. We're just going to pry those loose, letting this wiring come over to the side. Again, we've got a lot of auxiliary lighting somebody's added on here. We'll try to clean that up later, but we're going to have to unhook it to get this wiring out of our way to continue on here with our install. So I'm just going to take my screwdriver. I'm going to start up here, and I'm just going to pop loose each one of these connectors, sliding out the wiring at my gauges. Take my panel tool and pop them loose from our speaker pods. And all I'm doing is just getting this wiring loose so we can let it hang down here behind the radio. Don't let this part intimidate you. This is not hard. We're going to cover all the steps on wire management and how to put this back together as we go back together later on. Here is the GPS antenna, factory GPS antenna. We're going to be moving it later on in our install as well. It's this blue connector on the radio. There's a little button you're going to push, and it's going to allow you to unplug it. I'm going to take it out as we're disassembling here. Also, this next connector on the back of the radio is the factory USB. Pressing down on this black button is going to release that USB cable. We're going to plug that back into our V2 radio later. And let's go ahead and unplug our radio. There's a little black button in the middle here that if you press in, will let this lever rotate and unplug the radio. Now, somebody's had this apart. Some of these bolts are in the wrong place. We should not be seeing these particular bolts. These are an Allen head that held the speaker pods on originally. For some reason, they're out here on the outside. But we're going to go ahead and remove those. I'll have to get the correct Allen head for that. Normally, they're going to be a Torx. A Torx will fit in it. We're going to remove these 4 bolts that are going out into that pod, though. So find the right tool for your install, but that is not the normal bolt that's in there. This is that Sirius XM bracket. You may or may not have that, depending on if you have Sirius XM. Just holds that antenna. I'm going to break these loose. And then continue it out with this T30. Normally a T25 fits the bolts that are actually in these speaker pods, but they're always very, very tight. All right, so we're going to swap back to our T25. That's the correct tool that we should be using. We're going to take this bolt that goes from the tray to the storage pocket loose. We're also going to take off these 4 that go into the top of the radio. These bolts will be going back in later, holding our new amp plate, plus this plate in. We'll go over that as we get to that point. We're also going to remove this piece of Velcro somebody put here to hold the antenna down. We'll take that off before we put our plate back on. Now you're going to have 2 more Torx that go in on each side of your speedometer / tachometer. So remove those out. Once you remove this last one, this plate is going to be free. We're going to remove it from on top of the radio. Now we're just going to take that and set it to the side. All right, so now we want to take our radio out next, but to get it out, we're going to have to remove the speedometer and the tachometer. We have 1 more Torx T25 there that we're going to take out, which is going to give us access or the ability to just take this gauge out. I'm going to take these little trim bezels off with it. All right, so now we're going to go back to our 3/16 Allen T-handle. We're going to break the 4 bolts loose on the radio. We've already unplugged the radio as we went through this process. So once we get it unbolted, we're just going to lift it up and out. This radio is not going back in. This is the GTS radio that came out in 2019. They've continued it all the way to these 2025 models, but there is just such better radios available at this point than they had in 2019. All right, so at this point, we're going to actually take a couple retainers out of this plastic tray, and we're going to bring it forward to give us a better visual of the bolts holding our speaker pod on. This is a Tri Glide. I know it looks like the same fairing as an Ultra Limited or a Street Glide or an Electric Glide. It is not the same. The actual rake of the front forks are different. It makes removal of the speaker pods quite a bit harder. So we're going to show you some tricks on how to access these bolts easier than you would traditionally do. We are going to be taking a lot of things out that you may want to try to fight around. Don't fight around them. Go through these steps. It's going to be easier. We're going to save you time, and you're going to do it right. All right, so we're going to remove a little bit more wiring here. I'm just going to pop out this retainer here on this side. And then we're going to take this retainer out. It's just a Phillips screw. If you'll take the middle out and then press, you can take these right out. I'm going to put them back in later to hold it in place. It's just a little push pin with a Phillips insert in the middle of it. Once we've got that undone, we're going to take this tray with this wiring on it, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this zip tie because it's not normally here. Somebody has changed out the handlebars and they've extended a few things when they did it. We're going to take this tray and we're just going to slide it backwards and out of here, which is going to give us a lot better visibility of those bolts. I'm going to undo this one off this corner so it'll slide easier. Again, this rake is different, so there's not a lot of room here, and there's really hard to see the bolts that we need to take loose. All right, so I'm going to get this back and stand it up. Now I can get into some of the bolts that are in here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and unplug some of these connectors just for visibility. I want you to be able to see this better. So we're going to unplug some of these data connections that were on this plate. We'll go across there and unplug these. We'll make sure we plug them back in the same place later. And we're going to make sure they all get plugged in because your bike will not operate correctly with them unplugged. But once those are undone, I've got a little bit more room to bring this down to let you see more. All right, so in this video, this is a 2025 Tri Glide. We've done a lot of Tri Glides from 14 all the way up till now. This particular one has Allen head bolts holding the speaker pods on. This is not normal. Most of you watching are going to have either a 7/16 or an 11mm wrench. It's going to be a bolt. You're going to have to use a wrench, or you're going to use a socket. It's going to have an Allen head in the middle of it that's probably going to be at 3/16. In this case, these are 1/4 inch, so this is going to be a little different than what you would normally see. Most of the time, we're going to get straight on with a socket with these two, and that last hard to get to one we're going to break loose with a wrench, and then we're going to use a 3/16 Allen head to bring it the rest of the way out. To do that, you're going to take the 3/16 Allens off around the perimeter of the pod and allow it to lean out, which we will do as we take this last bolt out. Don't think that we set you up and this is different. It is different, but Harley did it. 2025's got different bolts. So we're going to start taking the perimeter bolts out so our pod's loose, and then we're going to remove these two outer ones, and I'll show you how to do this one because the bolt's just not going to come straight out if you can see up in there. All right, so first we'll start with these perimeter bolts. I'm just going to break those loose and remove those. They're going to be back to our normal 3/16 Allen head. Now, I told you earlier they'd changed the upper pod bolts. Apparently, they've swapped hardware on the 2025s. So those 3 perimeter bolts are now loose. And I didn't know, this one's had an inner fairing that's been painted. It had a Rockford system put in it at one point. So you never know if somebody's changed hardware. But this is going to be a little different, I think, just because it is new. Now we're going to take our 1/4 inch. I've got a 1/4 inch Allen head T-handle. It has the wobble end. We also have a 1/4 inch on a ratchet, if needed, that also has a wobble so we can get in there. But we're going to attempt to do it first from this T-handle. Normally these are very, very tight, but again, this bike has been apart a few times. Once I get them loose some, I should be able to take them the rest of the way out by hand. That last one, we're going to have to get at an angle. It's up here right behind that shock tower. So as I spin it loose, Robbie's going to hold on to this speaker pod, and he's going to let it kind of lean out some so that we can get this fully unbolted. We're probably just going to let this bolt hang out in that hole till we go to put it back on. All right, you're loose. All right, so I'm just going to leave that bolt there. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, so on this side, we've got our cigarette lighter. We're going to reach up in here and we're just going to unplug that. We're going to go ahead and unclip this wire from the pod. We're going to take our 3/16 Allen head and remove those perimeter bolts. Just being careful I don't scratch the lens on his light with my T-handle. You expect these other ones to be that tight. Normally they're tight enough where the pod goes to the frame that they actually pop when you break them loose. So again, starting in here with an Allen head tool. That one's actually somewhat loose. We're just going to take it out by hand. All right, we've got one more to go. That's the hard one up here. Robbie's going to hold that speaker pod as I take it out. Again, normally they're so tight I use an open-ended wrench and I break that bolt loose with my wrench. Then I can use an Allen head tool to try to take it out like this. All of this wiring has been extended to this for these new handlebars that have been on here. All right, so now is the time to change your speaker grills. You do not want to get this all put back together and then remember that you forgot from this side that you did your speaker grill. So while the pods are off, the radio's out, and it looks like you've took your bike all apart and you're not going to get it back together, but you are. Just keep watching. We want to go ahead and take these grills out. This had the HD audio by Rockford previously put in at the dealership, and so it has those grills in it. We're going to be removing those and putting in our Hertz grills. Normally you're going to have very similar hardware, but the hardware that you're going to have is more of a flat screw. I think they actually sandwich these in, so I've got to take them apart. Yours likely only has 3 screws holding it. All right, so our grills are going to go in with just 3 screws. So we're going to use 3 of those screws that were used before. Let's put this in. Make sure you got your logo facing the right way. All right, same thing on the other side. Let's go and get this grill off as well. It's just a T20 Torx removing these. I've seen them be a Phillips screw at times, but normally they're going to be Torx. I'm going to have a few screws left over that aren't going to be used because we don't need but just 3 to put these in. All right, so now we didn't forget to put our grills in. Let's go ahead and go over to our speaker pods. We're going to change out the 6.5s in those pods. We'll talk about our Hertz speakers a little bit more while we do that. And then we're going to clean and wrap those pods with Soundskins material while we're doing that. All right, so we've got our speaker pods over here on our table. You're going to take a T25 Torx screwdriver, just remove the 4 screws that are either holding in the factory speaker, or in this case, it had the HD audio by Rockford speakers. It's the same exact process. Once you get your speaker out, just unplug the spade terminals. And now let's talk about our speakers. So normally it's going to be a factory 5 1/4. The 5 1/4 inch speaker has a microscopic magnet on it, and it looks pretty terrible. In this case, he already paid quite a bit of money, and he added these back at his dealership. Not nearly as loud as he was hoping for, not as clear as he was hoping for. We're changing that with these Hertz SX165 Neos. These will handle up to 200 watts of power. We're going to send 180 watts of continuous power to them. These we're getting more like 65 or 70. So going to be a huge difference in power, but we have a speaker that'll handle it that's much more musical capable. So we're going to have a lot of loudness and volume, but we're going to have clarity, and it's going to have a great tone. And to make sure of that, we're going to wrap these pods with Soundskins before we drop this speaker back in. So we've got a few pieces are going to go inside. Just want to take a second to talk about that speaker. We'll put these to the side for now. We'll remove our other one. We'll clean these, and then we'll get our Soundskins material put on them. All right, so I get asked all the time, is Soundskins actually worth it? Is it worth buying? Is it worth applying? And I'll tell you that every one of my bikes has this on the front pods, and they're the ones I'm going to let you hear when we demo a bike. And the reason I put it on there isn't because I like to waste time or buy more parts or make it heavier. I like it because it gives us better mid-bass. It actually makes that fairing much tighter. It gets rid of rattles, resonation, vibration, and anytime we can get that speaker to where it's not vibrating this pod as much, the vibration of that sound is projected towards you. This is affected much more in the mid-range area, and we've actually done bikes, half the bike with Soundskins, half without, and had it where we could swap left and right, and it is a huge side-by-side comparison. While you have it apart is the time to do it. Don't think about adding this at a later time because you don't want to have to go through all the trouble of taking all this back off. So while you're doing your installation of your system is when you want to go ahead and wrap these. These are an option in every one of those plug and play packages at Volunteer Audio. We don't make you buy it, but we give you an option to add it. And if you did, we're going to go over this. If you did not buy these, you could stop now and order them if you wanted to, or you could continue on by it once we get done putting your speakers back in place. So just watch through this and we'll get to the part where you need to pick up if you didn't do Soundskins. All right, so I've got some isopropyl rubbing alcohol. I've put on a paper towel. I'm just going to wipe over my pods, just making sure they're clean, that there's no dust or dirt on them that's going to keep our Soundskins material from wanting to stick well. This is just a quick wipe over. We don't have to make them perfectly spotless, but we just want to make sure there's something they can adhere to. Just going to do that to both of our pods. Next step, we're going to take our Soundskins. It's already been pre-cut for us at the factory. So all we're going to do is we're going to take and we're just going to tear these pieces out. Being careful that we don't actually tear the material that we're putting on. Sometimes it's easier to do this from the back side. They cut most of the way through, but they leave just a little bit there for you to tear so it doesn't all fall apart in shipping. As you tear out each one of these puzzle pieces, take the excess and just set it to the side. You may find that you have a use for it, maybe in your tour pack pods or somewhere else as you do your install. These squares are going to be put inside of the pods. Normally we end up with a couple of these squares left over. If you do, a good place to put them is inside that tour pack pod. If you see that your bike doesn't have an option, like maybe you don't have controls on that pod for your passenger to change the radio. If you don't, you're going to find out there's vinyl over where those controls would go, but that hole is just left open. And so putting this over those holes actually really helps keep that vinyl on the outside of the pod from just vibrating and rattling around. You do not want to block the vent that's going into the tour pack. That is something that is definitely there for a reason and gives you much better mid-bass out of your speakers. All right, so we're going to get all our pieces laid out here. Some of these you're going to see definitely look like there's a left and a right version of them. You're going to have some duplicates. So I'm going to arrange those by type. And I always start with the big pieces first because they're easy to figure out where they go. So let's start on the back of our pod. You'll notice this is the side that has the cigarette lighter. We're going to use this big piece here that already has the cutout for it. This is very simple. We're just going to peel the backing off. This butyl rubber here is very, very sticky. It's just going to self-stick to it. And these are a multi-layer, so there are two layers. You're going to have a foam outer layer, then a layer that looks like aluminum foil, followed by this very, very sticky layer. All right, so we're going to take this, and we're just going to line up these little recesses, or these cutouts around these factory bolts. And we're just going to press down, and we're just going to stick it in place. Very, very easy to install. So now we're going to take our other side, take this smaller portion here that also has this cutout. You're going to see it fits right here on the front. This part goes right here. A lot of times you can test fit where they're going to go before you peel the backing. Pressing it in place. Some parts are not easy to do from the outside, and so they decided to put them on the inside. If you've noticed, there's not a lot of good area here to stick it. So we're going to have this one right here that actually fits right inside of the pod. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of alcohol and clean that spot real quick. Sticking that on the inside of the pod. Now we have another piece. It's this long part, and it's going to go in here right in this area on the inside. As you see right there, just stuck on the inside of that rib. The other one is in this area. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put the large pieces on the other pod, and then we'll come back to doing the inside a little bit more. So here is our large outer portion that goes on the back. So it looks like we got everything lined up well. I'm just going to take my hand, just put some pressure and rub over it and make sure it's stuck good. This doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be close. And that's going to take up that distance between that outer fairing and the speaker pod, creating a much, much better fit, a lot less resonation. All right, going over to the other side, you'll see we have similar pieces like we had on the other one, but without that hole for the cigarette lighter or that power outlet. All right, and here's that part that's going to go on the inside of this pod. So I want to get a little bit of alcohol and clean in there as well. Put it in place and just press it down. Now, same thing inside that we did on the other one. We're going to take this longer, skinny piece. Just going to position it on this inner flap. Make sure it's straight. Press it in place. All right, so now you got these extra squares. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this inside area. You're going to see these ribs in these big areas. We're just going to find some areas where they fit and stick them on the inside of the pod. It's okay if it laps over the ribs a little bit. It's not going to hurt anything. So I've put one here and here. I'm going to put another one on the inside in here. That's going to leave me one extra in case we need anything to go in our Tour Pack pod. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. Again, don't let the ribs inside make you not use that part. It'll contour right around them without problem. Stick it in place. All right, so as you see, we've got this piece, two on the back wall, one here at the bottom, and that's going to leave us two extra pieces in case we need them later. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So let me get this cleaned up, and we'll come back and put the speakers in. All right, so going back together, I'm going to have Robbie hold the pod while we try to get this bolt started straight. We're going to start with the hardest one first. Actually, I may reach in and try to do this by hand. All right, now at this point, use the tool to start it. There we go. It's starting in straight. It's threading in. All right, so that one is most of the way in, so I'm going to go ahead and start the other ones now. Soundskins definitely makes everything fit a little tighter, so it's going to be a little bit harder to start than it would have been without it. That's the whole point. Did you move it?
Sometimes if you wiggle it,
Yeah, I don't need you to wiggle it. I'm just going to start these by hand. It's always best to get a couple threads in before you try to put a tool on it. And if you can keep going, if it's not too tight, it's going to be faster to do it with your fingers as well. All right, I'm gonna start these perimeter ones and get those in. Then I'll go back and tighten those a little bit more. You definitely want to put all the bolts back in. I know some of you are probably contemplating leaving a few of them out, but you want to put them all back in, especially these down here, because this is the frame of the front of your fairing. This is what's going to keep it from vibrating and bouncing around, keeping all this from shaking while you're going down the road, is having all the hardware in. All right, so now I'm going to take that 1/4 inch. I'm going to get it back in here, and I'm going to go tighter on these 3 to make sure they don't ever come out. All right, so we're going to do the same thing on the other side. This one's one you just kind of have to feel for. You lean it forward more. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and hand start these additional ones. All right, so we've got all 3 of these started. They're most of the way in. I'm going to go ahead and put those perimeter bolts in now before we go all the way tight. I'm pushing up on the inner fairing to line this up because we've got a really tight fit now with this Soundskins in, which is awesome. All right, so now I'm going to get back in here, try to get on these a little better, making sure they're very, very tight. All right, we're going to put our tray back in place now. So this is something else you want to remember to do. Now's the time. Don't put your radio in and start on up until you've got all this wiring back where it goes and back in place. Now on the back of this plate, there are 2 ears. I have to line up with 2 slotted holes. So we want to make sure that we get that done. While we can still see it easily. Got that one lined up. Got the other one lined up. Just having these extended bars has some metal cables under here that are wanting to put us in a little bit of a bind. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and find all of our connectors, and I want you to visually inspect them, make sure nothing has come unpinned. It's very common for these to want to back out. And we don't want to get done and then find out we have something not working. So again, just checking all these connectors, especially with aftermarket handlebars. It's really common to see them come undone. I'm plugging this large black connector back in here. And then the one to the side. This one's actually supposed to be in a holder. It's been previously broken from part of maybe the handlebar installation or something else that was done. Let's try to put it back where it goes. All right, so we're going to do some different wire management with some of these things. We're going to cut this actual light harness loose. We're going to move it somewhere else as we go. When we go back together, we'll tidy that up further. Also, This is getting a V2 radio. The V2 has an Idatalink Maestro module that we're going to slide up next to this pocket. And because of that, I'm going to go ahead and relocate some of these little boxes they've glued in here for their lights, because they're going right where my module needs to go to stay in its best, most protected location. And I want to show you the right place to put that. So we're going to move these. They've two-way taped these down, so let me get them pried loose. We'll secure those later after we go back together. All right, so our SoundStream Reserve V2 radio is the exact size, shape, dimensions as the factory radio. I pointed out earlier that gap at the bottom of the inner fairing. That is so normal on a Street Glide fairing. Even on a brand new Tri Glide that's a 2025 model, they didn't fit perfect from the factory. So don't let that throw you off. This radio, though, is going to bolt in exactly like the other one did. And we're going to actually put in the bolts with the rubber isolators. Now you're going to see you get 4 of these isolators in the box with your radio. We just pop them out of the original radio and reuse those while we take the bolts out. Let's go ahead and bolt this back in. So right around here on the front. If you look back down in here, you'll now see we have that same gap that we had before. It's just right at the bottom. You're going to notice that, but it was there with the original radio. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put our gauge back in, our tack and our speedo. We want to do that before we forget. All right, so at this point, we're just going to put the top bolt in. We'll put the other ones in when we put this little tray back on. All right, so we're just going to slide that tray back into place. And I'm going to put all our perimeter bolts in, because last we're going to put the 4 in here because they're going to hold our new amp plate in. So we'll start with the ones on both sides of our tack, our speedo. Just starting those. I'm not going to tighten them up till I get the side bolts lined up. Actually using a T30 Torx. These are an Allen head, but my Torx screwdriver makes this a lot easier than fighting with a T-handle. And a T30 fits just fine. All right, so I'm just starting them all. I haven't tightened any of them really yet. So now that those are all started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten the ones on both sides of the gauge all the way up. I'll tighten those outside ones. All right, so now we're going to put the last bolt in before we do our amp tray. It just holds this little storage pocket in place. You'll notice as you move your fairing kind of forward and backwards, these holes change as to where they line up. So you may have to move this around just slightly as you put your amp plate in. All right, so we're just going to lay our plate over, lining up these 4 holes. We'll start each one. We're not going to tighten any of them until they're all started. This is what our amp is going to bolt to. It's an aluminum plate. Pulling back just slightly on that outer fairing. By pulling it toward me, I'm able to line the holes up better. But now they're all lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down. Every one of these bolts are important. Every one of these help keep this fairing bolted tighter. It's not going to resonate as much. which is going to amount to no rattles and no vibrations beyond the normal amount you get on your Harley. All right, so now we're just going to start plugging in harnessing back where it went. So we're going to plug in our front speaker pod for now. This one's going to get lower, so we're going to T-harness into that later. But for now, I'm just putting it in to get it out of the way. Plugging in our upper gauge here. Go ahead and plugging in that speedo intact. Coming on across. Plugging in this outer gauge. Making sure that we take each one of these retainers and put them back in where they were from the factory. As we come down the pod, we're going to go ahead and plug back in our cigarette lighter. Plugging in our speaker pod. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start two of the screws that came with our amp plate in the end here. We're just going to put them in a couple threads. Robbie's bringing over my amp now, and we're going to slide it into these holes. And we're going to face the wire all this way. We'll slide it in under those screws. And then we're going to start the screws on the other end. All right, so we're going to stop here for a minute. We're going to move on to some other tasks. I want to run the power in the ground from the battery up into the fairing before we start our wire management. You definitely want to watch that because these cables look like they're too long and you don't know what to do with them, but I'm going to cover exactly where they're supposed to go, zip tight, put it in place. We're going to take the seat off, the gas tank off. We're going to probably install our lowers, and then we'll catch back up here as we put the lower wiring plugged in. We'll start routing that power and ground. We'll start doing the cleanup of the wiring. You're definitely going to want to see that because doing that correctly is going to make it so much easier in the future putting that fairing on and off. So let's move to the back and let's go and take our seat off. I'm going to take the backrest off, which has a little lever here we've got to push outward to slide forward and remove. Now we're going to actually open our tour pack. That's going to give us a little better access to our seat bolt. And this one's got an Allen head in it. And this could be factory because we've seen a lot of new Allen heads. So I'm using a T30 that's fitting inside of that, maybe a T27. Just going to lift up so I can get my bolt. A lot of them have a Phillips screw there. There's our seat. We'll set it to the side. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and prep and get our gas tank off. This scares people. It's easy. 4 bolts hold it on, a few electrical connections, and a quick disconnect fuel line that actually shuts the fuel off as soon as we unplug it. First, we're going to take this vent hose, and we're just going to pull it out. We'll have to route it back down through there later. We're going to unplug the electrical connector that goes from the tank to under the seat. There's actually 2 of them here. And then you're going to see a vent line right here that we're just going to disconnect. So we've got all of these things undone from the back of the tank. So now we're going to take our fuel line and we're going to disconnect it. This is simple. Well, you might have to just twist this a little bit in case it's an older bike just to break it loose, but you're going to slide the silver sleeve up. At the same time, pull down on that fuel line. A couple drips of fuel will be on the end, but you'll see it is shut off and it is no longer leaking. And now we're just going to remove the 4 bolts and take the tank off. All right, so we've got our Milwaukee battery ratchet with a 13 millimeter socket. We're going to go ahead and remove the 2 at the back of the gas tank. Now up at the front of the tank, there's a little rubber cover over the bolt. You're just going to pull out on it to take it off. Then we're going to take our ratchet to remove that bolt. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Actually, there's no rubber cap there, so it must be missing. So as long as you don't have any underglow lighting or anything on the tank to unplug, we should be ready to remove it. We're just going to go ahead and take the gas tank down and lift it up, set it over to the side. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put speakers in our lowers. The time to do that's while the gas tank's off, so I'm going to move to those steps. We're going to go ahead and snap out these covers on each side. Set those to the side. All right, so now we have a 7/16 or an 11 millimeter. Either one is the same size. We're going to go in and remove one bolt that's holding this cap on. Then we should be able to just remove this cover. Just kind of fits around kind of tight. Set it over to the side as well. All right, so next we're going to actually take that same socket, that 7/16. We're going to remove this upper strap, this clamp that holds the lowers to this bar. All right, before we move on to our next step, we're going to take our little vent, put the lever in the middle, drop our screwdriver into it as well. T25 Torx, going ahead and removing that. It's going to let us take this little handle off. It's going to make us where we're free to remove this outer cover. Same tool, T25 Torx. We're going to come in here and remove 3 bolts around the perimeter. They're holding this piece of trim on. This one you can access from under this metal bar, the engine guard. We got 2 more to remove, one here at the top. All right, so we've got the 3 bolts out. We've undone our latch here. Now we're just going to have to pull out on this to unclip it. We're going to take it around our wire. See on the back side there were 2 clips that were just pressure fit. Now that that's out, we're going to go to our table. We're going to grab our other parts and get them ready to come back and bolt them on to have our speaker provision. All right, so we are going to have to transfer one of these clips. So we're just going to take a small straight screwdriver, just pry from underneath, releasing the portion that's holding it in place. There's a clip on the top and the bottom. This same clip is just going to snap right in on this side. And you're going to see that you included are a couple foam strips, and I'm going to show you where they go. They're actually going to go right here. So you're going to test fit, make sure it fits, and then you're just going to peel it, put it in the correct place. They're just going to be self-stick. So at this point, we're going to go back to the bike. We're going to run the speaker wire from the upper speaker pod down, to the lower fairing, and then we'll put this back on afterward. All right, when you buy a plug-and-play package from Volunteer Audio, we keep up with every part you're going to need. So we do these installations every day, and part of that is going to be this plug-and-play lower harness. So this has a male and female connector that's going to plug in at our front speaker pod, and then we're just going to route this down the neck and to where this speaker goes. So let's go to the other side, and I'll show you where it plugs in. All right, so we're just going to go to our upper speaker pod connector here, and we're going to unplug it, plug in our lower harness, plug it back in here, and that's simple. We have added a connector to go to the bottom. Now, some of you are probably wondering, how can you just connect that to the upper speaker? But this amplifier is 2 ohm stable. When it is in 4 ohm mode, which is just uppers, it's doing about 180 watts to each speaker. When it sees the additional speaker, it's going to drop the 2 ohm, which is going to increase the power. On our dyno, that's about 285 to 288 watts. And so automatically it's going to increase power. And we're using 4 ohm speakers top and bottom to give us that 2 ohm load. We're not going to use 2 ohm speakers in this installation. So we're just going to route this speaker wire down here where it would go. All right, so we're going to start at our speaker pod now, and we're going to take a couple zip ties, and we're just going to secure our wiring while we have our adapter off. So I'm going to bring a wire up around this coolant hose. And you don't need a lot of wire. We probably need about that much, just enough to get our speaker out the pod. Get it wired. Continue this back through here, just following along with that. I'm going to put one around this engine guard. And we're going to run another one just straight up to this factory harness that runs into the fairing. Lifting around here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and flush cut each one of these zip ties. All right, so now we're going to take our excess wiring that we've got running into the fairing, and we're going to run it actually behind this plate here. If you're wondering how I got behind that plate, all you do is just kind of slide forward on it and it will come loose. When you're done, the same thing, just kind of start at the front of it, locking it back in, sliding it backwards. We're just routing it behind that just like the factory wiring does. Always keep in mind on this bike, when you move the fairing, you got to leave enough room for the wiring to move. So we're going to route it with factory wiring in that same way. And that's going to keep us from ever having our wiring in a bind where it won't turn. All right, so we're going to get back to installing the rest of that speaker pod on our lower now that we've got our wiring ran. All right, so we're going to take our pod. Just going to start by getting it around this coolant hose. Then we're going to bring it down and clip in, let it snap in that pod, that portion on the bottom there. Now we're going to need a different tool as we put that back together. I'll get a ratchet. I'll actually use a little battery ratchet and put our handle back on. But I'm going to go ahead and start the bolts on the other side first. All right, so I'm just going to reuse those factory bolts. And to get them lined up, I'm just going to stick it through the hole, making sure I can see where it starts into this pod. We'll do that for each one. Before you tighten any of them, get them all lined up. It's going to make your job much easier. Just start them a few threads before you move on. This last one's going to be the harder one, but since we've got the first two lined up, it may be a little easier than if we started there. All right, so I've got that started. They've got a little bit of light wiring here that they've ran through previously. I'm going to make sure it doesn't get pinched as this tightens up. Making sure we're still clipped in. Now I'm going to tighten all three of our bolts up. All right, so now that we have those three in, we can go back together with our retainer here. All right, we always want to make sure we put a little bit of Loctite on this, because if anything is going to come loose, it's going to be this, because you can only go so tight and allow it to still spin. So we're going to drop a little bit in the threads there. Now we're going to take our battery ratchet with our T25 Torx. Line up this bolt. All right, so if you tighten it and it won't spin, you went too far. Back it off just a little. Because you really can't go tight and it still moves, you got to have that Loctite so when it dries, it won't fall out on you. Once you see it still moves, you're good. And we're going to go ahead and go to the other side, put the other one on. We'll come back in a few and put the speaker in and the grill. All right, so before you go to put the speakers in, you got to remember to put your caps on. We're just going to slide it back on. Trying to make sure we get this outside ear lined up. All right, before we put our speaker in, we're going to go ahead and take our terminals and we're going to crimp them just a little bit tighter. We want to make sure these terminals don't ever come loose. Just squeeze them a little bit more. Don't squeeze them too much or you'll fight trying to get them on. Now on the back of your speaker, you're going to have a positive and a negative that is stamped into this little black portion. It's kind of hard to read. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our solid speaker wire and we're going to connect it to the one that says positive facing toward the magnet side. Sometimes you got to wiggle these a little bit to get them to go all the way on. Now we're going to spin it around and get it going the correct orientation. I'm going to take these fine threaded screws that come with our lower adapters and a T15 Torx, and we're going to start these screws in. All of this fits perfectly with the supplied grills that we get you. These are actually made by two different manufacturers. Your plug-and-play system from Volunteer Audio. We know everything that works together. I love these lower adapters because they have brass inserts for these screws. It just goes together so nice. All right, let's move on to the other side. All right, so we got our lower speakers in. They look awesome. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to run our power and ground cable from the battery into the fairing. We've already got the gas tank off. We did that earlier. We're going to remove this cover. This is called the backbone cover. Most of the time, there's going to be some tape wrapped around that you're going to be cutting the edges on, maybe even a couple zip ties you have to cut. There was a previous install done on this bike, so they're not here, but normally there's a strip here, here, and here. They've already been cut. So we're not going to do that step, but you need to remove those if they're in your way. There are little clips up here that go through this plastic. All you have to do is just unclip it from around it, pulling outward. And then normally after I do that, I'll just pull the other way, kind of wiggling back and forth, we'll undo those. Now we have, this is our ABS brake lines. We're going to pop those out of this cover over to the side and then make sure we put those back where they are later. And we'll go over that at that point. Again, just kind of moving back and forth as we pop this loose. That's going to expose all that factory wiring. This is where your wiring is supposed to go. We are reusing factory wiring to the TruePack speakers, so no need to run new rear speaker wiring. All we're going to do is run that power and ground wire up to the front. Okay, to make access to connect it to the battery, we're going to go ahead and unplug, or actually, I'm going to remove a couple parts here. So we're going to take the transmitter. This is the transmitter that actually, or the receiver for your key fob. I'm going to unplug it and set it to the side. This is your ECM. I'm going to unplug it and do the same thing. And this part is for California emissions, which this bike doesn't have. We're going to just move all of these parts over to the side. Now we're going to take our 13 millimeter and take the two bolts off at the rear of the battery cover. And this bike is a newer bike. It's a 2025. Somebody's already broke this, apparently not knowing how to take it off. But all you do is pull out on the front of it and slide forward, and you can slide these cables right off of this cover. Now we're going to slide the whole cover forward, up and over this, and now we have our battery exposed. So we're going to go ahead and connect our power and ground. Our black cable is going to go to the battery negative side. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that bolt first. If you have an alarm on your bike, it may chirp some. Just be quick. We're always going to face our terminals toward the front. This allows our cover to go back on. Quickly take that positive terminal off. All right, so now we're going to take a little excess cable, including this fuse holder. We're just going to take it and put it in front of the battery down in here. We want to be able to store this fuse holder up in the front, but we don't want it to be in the way of other things. When you get your cables from Volunteer Audio, all of this is already put together. It's already sheathed. The fuse is already in place. We've even zip tied it closed. Now we're just going to run our cable up the side of this backbone. Go that far. Just going to put our cover back on. As you do this, keep in mind, make sure none of the factory wires are trying to come out. If they are, just make sure you put them back in so you don't pinch them or mess them up. Make sure we get our brake lines back in where they go. Just continue to snap it back as we go toward the back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put our cover back on our battery. All right, so now we're going to go ahead, I'm going to take this, there's a plastic cover over these cables that if you'll just take and push toward the front, it'll come loose. When it does that, I'm going to go ahead and feed my wiring in behind it and toward the front. I'm going to pass that on to Robbie up there. All right, so we're going to put that cover back in place. And you're going to think you have some excess wiring, but we're actually going to run this wiring up and over and behind the speedometer and the tach. So now it's time to do a little bit of wire management in our fairing. We get done with this, we'll put our gas tank back on, and we'll change those rear speakers out. All right, so now that we have our cable ran up into our fairing, I'm just going to run it up this side and we're going to plug it in. Get a couple zip ties here. We're going to start running our wiring that's related to the amp up and over around the back of these gauges. So we give this excess wiring because we want it up in this area. So we're going to take a zip tie, go around this factory cabling that's here, bringing it around. And these plugs up in this area. As we come across, doing the same thing again here. going to continue to follow that factory wiring, zip tying as we go. I'm going to go ahead and flush cut these. All right, so next we're going to start plugging in our radio harness. This is what's going to come in your Soundstream Reserve V2 box. It's already programmed by Volunteer Audio, so you don't have to do any programming, and the radio's fully up to date. We get this question all the time about what order things plug in. This is going to plug directly into the back of the radio. You're going to plug it in and then rotate this to lock it in. Now, I'm going to actually add dielectric grease to all the connections on the module to make sure it stays very, very weather tight. So we're going to take the connections, and we're going to unplug them one at a time, putting dielectric grease in every single one of these holes. Water doesn't travel through grease, so this is going to make sure that we do not have any issues with water from rain getting down in here. I'll also show you proper placement in the fairing. That's actually very important as well. On the other side, we're going to make sure and look. This black connector can plug in any of these 4 ports. The black connector goes into the black port, so just make sure you plug it into the right place when you go back together. All right, so green connector into the green hole. Black connector into the black hole. The other black connector up here. Now to take weatherproofing an even further step, I'm going to show you how to take a sandwich bag, this little Ziploc bag. We don't want to seal our interface in the bag, but I'm going to take a pair of scissors. I'm just going to cut it up here through the middle and put it over our interface. Just make sure no water ever drips through here into it. The only part of this that could ever get affected by water is this little Maestro box. So by placing this bag over it and dielectric grease in the connectors, we're not going to have to worry about getting caught in a rainstorm and ever affecting the way the radio is going to work. I'm also going to stick it up in the side here. So this is that storage pocket. That door opens and closes. We're going to slide this bag up in beside it with our Maestro module. If you'll just wiggle it, it'll make its way on up toward the front and fit into there. Very nice. So now we're going to take a zip tie and we're going to zip tie this harnessing up into this top corner. I'm going to go ahead and finish plugging in our lower pod harness from the other side. Getting it secured up in the fairing where we want it to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put our USB into this pocket. So what we're going to do is we're just going to push the factory grommet into the pocket, making our cable just a little shorter out here, but a little longer inside. And then they've gave us a new grommet from Soundstream and a new USB cable. This is a charge-only USB-C. The factory USB will still be connected to the radio for data transfer. We're just going to push this wire right past and into that pocket. We're going to take this little slit that's been cut in here from Soundstream and we're going to feed our factory USB cable into there. Once we get that in place, we're going to pull this on forward and push into that hole. This is something we want to go ahead and get in because we're going to have to do some wire management with that as we move forward. We're also going to plug our USB into that original USB connection. And then we still have our amp turn-on wire. I want to plug it in to the radio harness here at the radio. All right, so we have our amp harness. Our amp harness is going to have a couple things we're not going to use. So let's go over those. We're going to have one that says do not use, and in this install, we're not going to be using this rear speaker output because we're using the factory rear speaker wires. If this was an Ultra Limited, Road Glide Limited, any other bike that had a factory tour pack that could do lid speakers, this would be used to run those lid speakers. So we're going to take our amp harness, we're going to plug it into our radio harness here. Let me open this lever up. We're going to take the other side of this, we're going to plug it into the original radio harness. Like so. All right, so what I like to do with all of this harnessing is I do leave the throttle control connector here unplugged, and I like to pull this. Let's get all this untangled here. I like to pull this portion of our main harness over toward the middle of this radio area, and I'm going to actually take a zip tie. Let me get make sure my headlock wiring is where it's supposed to go. Take a zip tie down through that plastic tray. Bring it up to this harness. I'm going to zip tie this harness up like so. So all we did was we really moved it from here to over here. That's going to give us a little bit more lead to get some of these excess wires that we're not using into this storage pocket. Let's move across a little further. So follow along, because we're going to make this look clean, and we're going to make it where in the future that it's very easy to do, to take the fairing on and off. So we're not going to be using this rear speaker connector, so we're going to stick it up into this big open void that we have to the side. Remember, we removed that WEM earlier because we weren't going to be using it, and we didn't need it any longer with our new V2 radio. These factory accessory connectors are no longer going to be used. One of those plugged into that WEM harness, they're going to go up into this hole. We're also going to take the actual radio connector, and we're going to feed it up into that same open void because there's a lot of room in here. And this harness that said do not use goes in here as well. So all of this excess wiring, any of the extra length, goes into this pocket. And then once we get it up in here to a certain extent, a certain length, actually I want to route this down and under here. I'm going to take another zip tie, and I try to go normally through this little hole under our amp plate. There's just enough room to feed that zip tie through. Wrapping it around. This wiring can go right here, and it will not affect our fairing coming on and off at all. We don't want it over here. If you leave it out here, you're going to have a hard time with where the fairing wraps around getting caught or hitting that. But that's a great place to put it. So now we've got that caught, got that secured there. We're going to go ahead and zip tie that. Now we've got a couple things that we still have yet to do on this bike. It's going to get Sirius XM. So I've got a Sirius XM tuner that I'm also going to stick up into this same hole. And I'm going to plug into the Sirius XM output. All right, so with the SoundStream Reserve V2 radio, it is Sirius XM ready, meaning you can add an SXV 300 tuner to it and have standalone Sirius XM. You can also use the Sirius XM app through your phone through wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto. The wireless app does sound the best. It is going to be digital. It's going to use the data on your phone, but you're going to have the least amount of compression to the music, so better bass, better treble, and more overall volume and clarity. The standalone tuner does work, and in this case, we had factory Sirius XM, so this customer wants to add it back on. So in the SXV 300 box, you're going to get an antenna with about 20 foot of cord, which we don't need in our Harley. Because this has a factory antenna that's a lot shorter, we're going to use an adapter. It's called a SAT1 antenna adapter, and it's going to allow us to plug into that factory connection and allow it to now adapt and plug right into our box. So I can put my antenna back in that factory location, and we'll make sure it's secured after we get our vent in because there's going to be a bolt in place It's a little bit out of the way. But we can take this now, we'll plug it into the satellite output of the radio. You want to look in here, this only goes one way. Make sure you plug it in the correct direction until it snaps. I'm going to plug in our antenna adapter into here. And then we're going to take the excess cable and this box and put in this same area in this cubby hole next to the radio. You can fit a lot in that little area. I'm just going to route that cable in behind our wiring here. And our factory antenna is now connected up. Our Sirius XM tuner is in place. I'll put a couple zip ties over here just to secure this up. And we'll move on to the next part and get a few of these lights cleaned up. We're just going to continue on some more wire management on this side, getting our USB cable and our amp turn-on wire secured up here on this side. Zip ties are your friend. Just take your time. Make sure you get them in here where any of that excess is kind of looped over and held up. We don't want to just leave wiring hanging in the fairing. All right, we're going to take our factory GPS antenna and reinstall it. I like using that original antenna because it is smaller. One key thing about your antenna, you're going to place it back in this factory location, but when you're done, make sure you don't have any wiring between it and the sky, where it's going to make it where it doesn't want to work correctly. You would think, I've got wireless CarPlay, I've got wireless Android Auto, I don't need that, but your phone is actually going to use that signal along with the radio is going to use that signal and the signal together to give you the most accurate location information. So I'm going to spin this around and put it the right way. Got the little tab facing upward and plug it in. And that's good there. So now we're just going to try to continue to secure some of these lights. Hopefully you don't have this many lights in your fairing and you don't have to try to figure out where to put all of these. I'm going to go ahead and stick some of these boxes back in underneath here. We do have some room that's not being taken up by that MRR. Just below that storage pocket. All this wiring's got to get plugged back in. Give me a couple more zip ties. Give me one. Some of this has so much lead, there's just only so much you can do with it. This was a lead that went out to our fairing. We'll work on that later. We've got a couple connections over here that hook up, another lead that went out. So all of our connections are still where we can get to them. I just have one more little lead to tidy up here for our lower speaker harness. All right, so at this point, pretty happy with how much we've got all of this secured and put up. Our GPS antenna is just going to go right here behind. We'll get our vent in place. We'll get our hidden antenna back in using our Soundskins as our duct tape, holding that antenna in place on both sides. All right, so let's move on to the gas tank. We'll get it back on and then move to those rear speakers. All right, so we're going to go ahead and bolt in those front bolts. So this gas tank was missing one of these covers. So we don't have one for the other side. We're going to snap on the one that we had. Come to the back here, we're going to find this vent tube. Hook it back up. Along with both of our electrical connections, which they need to run down underneath this cable. All right, so now we have to run this vent tube down. On a Tri Glide, this is going to be a little bit more difficult. We're going to remove this side cover. And we're going to feed it down through this area where it's supposed to go, but we have to get it out a hole down here. So there's quite a bit in the way, especially with this relay bank you have here on the Tri Glide. It's not on a Street Glide or an Ultra. I'm going to help feed it through a hole here between the engine and here back into that direction. Once we get it out toward the bottom here, I'm going to pull it on down. Just runs behind these cables and vents out the side. You just want to make sure it's not on the exhaust, that it's up near the motor and dropping out behind. That's where it is factory. Now we've got that done, we'll go ahead and put our side cover back on. All right, don't forget to hook your fuel back up. I get calls quite often. People say, hey, I got done, my bike won't start. And it's as simple as hooking the fuel line up. Just push up on that silver ring, push up on that fuel line. Once it's all the way in, that ring will snap back down and our fuel is reconnected. All right, so we're at the rear speakers now. I'm going to go and open up this tour pack. It's just going to give us a little bit more access to our speakers. And I'm going to remove those factory grills or factory screws. These are going to be those really fine threaded bolts that actually go into a little rubber grommet in the tour pack. I couldn't tell you how many times that people lose a rear speaker after doing an upgrade, and normally it's because they do exactly what these speakers did. They reuse that factory hardware. We're not going to recommend that. I'm going to have you take the screws that came with your new speakers. We're actually going to spin this speaker around a little bit as we put the new one in, and we're going to drill directly into the pod with those screws, because these little rubber grommets will pull out and you will lose a speaker going down the road. So let's go ahead and get this speaker all the way out. We're going to take this HD audio by Rockford out and unplug it. Again, like all the other terminals, we're just going to squeeze these a little tighter to make sure that they stay on and we don't have to take them back off and plug them back in. Now we still have at the end, we're going to do a polarity test. So at that point, we may have to pull these speakers out and change this terminal direction, but we'll know that after we do the final test. So I've took my new Grille, I've snapped it into my Hertz speaker. Now on the back, it's labeled positive. We're going to take our positive terminal, putting it on the one that says positive. Sits tight. Same thing on the negative one. And then we're going to put it up in here. And what I was saying is we're not going to reuse these grommets. So we're going to take our speaker, we're going to spin it just ever so slightly. And we're going to take the screws that came with it and we're going to drive them straight into the pod, into the plastic. By doing so, we don't have to worry about losing this speaker going down the highway. Do that one more time. Again, looking to see which one's positive and negative. The gold terminal, which is the larger one, is going to be our negative. Not going to be tight enough yet, so we're going to squeeze it a little bit more. See those pliers, Rob? See if I got that enough. Same thing, dropping it in, spinning it over just enough that we're going to clear those grommets and going straight into that plastic. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and close my tour pack. That's going to give me a more accurate reading on my speakers. I'm going to take our protective film off the front of our radio. That screen is actually optically bonded glass. There's no need for a protective film, but they put it on there just to keep fingerprints off during manufacturing. But don't worry about buying a screen protector. You don't need one. All right, so I want you to go and connect your phone to your radio. So we went to the device list, we connected via Bluetooth, which then brought up our wireless Apple CarPlay. Then we went to YouTube, and we've went to Volunteer Audio's YouTube channel. We've looked up the Polarity speaker test, and when we hit play, we're going to hear some clicks and some pops out of the speakers. We're going to hold our Polarity tool in front of each one, making sure we're holding to the side. We don't want to be reading the tweeter, we want to read the woofer, and we're going to see what our polarity is. We want to make sure all 6 speakers match. If any of them give us a different reading, we're either going to get 3 green and 1 red flash or 3 red and 1 green flash. If any of them are different, we're going to pull that speaker back out. We're going to correct it now before we put everything back together. Let's go ahead and start this track. Let's go a little more volume. We don't have quite enough volume to get an accurate reading. All right. So this is exactly why we do this test. Harley's very inconsistent with how they wire the bikes. Even though we put the negative speaker wire on the negative terminal, our rear tour pack speakers are actually backwards. I'm going to pull both speakers out. We're going to swap those terminals. We're going to retest it. They should all match then. That's going to give us much better mid bass. If you have a speaker out of phase, you're still going to have volume. You're still going to have a ton of volume, but you're going to have a ton of treble and no bass to go along with it because these are going to cancel the bass of the ones in the front. So we're going to pull those out. We'll swap those terminals, recheck. If that passes, we'll put our seat back on, our fairing, and we're not long away from getting to hear it. All right, so we swapped them. We're retesting. All right, so now the back ones, let me pause this. Now our back speakers match the front. Our sound is going to be so much better. So now we're going to move forward. We'll go ahead and put our seat back on. We'll get our fairing on. We're almost done. All right, there was a lot going on in this fairing, so I'm going to get Robbie to help me get all these connectors plugged back in. Here. Not sure that. Get that. Put it down. That. Wait. This up and over. All right, lots plugged in. All right, so we got our windshield set on with that center bolt holding it. We're going to take our bolts and put it in the side. Remember, that long bolt is going to go up here at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it in place. Put it in most of the way. We're going to do the same thing with the lower bolt. It is going to be the shorter one. We don't want to put the long bolt in the short hole at the bottom. If you do so, you're going to mess up your paint, and you're going to be mad at me, and I told you not to do it. All right, so we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Long bolt at the top. Put our bottom one in as well. All right, so now we're going to drop our windshield in the top. My T25 actually fits in there pretty good. Oh, sorry, Rob. We'll make sure we start our windshield bolts good and straight. We don't want to have anything cross-threaded. This is going to help pull that fairing in, make it look good. Let's go and start the other one before we go real tight. All right, if you see you have any gap up here at all, and sometimes you do, especially with these extra wires ran for all these lights, you can loosen this one a little bit, press in on it, and tighten it back down. And it normally closes that gap up a little bit more. We do have Soundskins and a lot of harnessing and this thick light, so it may not be perfect, but it's going to be pretty close. All right. Making sure it's as good as I can get it. This stuff never fits perfect. All right, so don't forget to straighten out those front lights. Point them back straight. We can go ahead and remove that fender protector. All right, it's been a long time. Thank you for hanging out with us all the way to the end. If you made it to this point, you're done. Your bike is back together. It's time to connect our phone. It's time to listen to some music, and I'm ready to let you hear it. But I got to tell you, we cannot play just anything we want. It's got to be copyright-free music. So I'm going to pick Epidemic Sound. I'm going to find something to let you hear it. It's going to sound great, but it's not going to sound great through your little speakerphone on your phone. So you're going to have to get a good set of headphones or listen to it on a home audio system through your TV to get even close. But I'd love to have you come to Volunteer Audio, visit me in person, listen to one of the bikes, because this is not going to do it justice. But let's get this bike fired up. Let's listen to something and let you hear just how it sounds. All right, so it sounds awesome. I can't wait till tomorrow morning when I get to bring the customer back to listen to his bike. He's going to be pleased. He's going to be so happy. We took out that HD audio by Rockford that his dealer had installed. We've now got an actual awesome system. 6 hertz speakers, all the Neo motorcycle, a huge 1,000-watt amp, and an amazing radio to run it, just clean as can be. Great mid-bass, great treble. He's going to hear it at any speed. And this thing's got some loud exhaust, but I guarantee you, I can make it where you can't hear the wind, the engine, or the exhaust with this system. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you want to do this to your bike, give us a call, 1-844-30-AUDIO. Our knowledgeable sales team will talk about your bike, your build, your budget. We'll go over this with you. We'll make sure you get all the right parts. Nobody does plug and play like Volunteer Audio. I'm going to say it again, nobody does it like we do it. From customer service to including all the parts you need to doing all the technical hard things. We know you don't have an oscilloscope. We know you don't have a crossover calibrator. We're doing the settings on the amplifiers with the proper tools, updating the radio, flashing the Maestro, making sure you get everything you need, and then you have amazing step-by-step videos like this one to go over every bit of the install. And if you get stuck with your lifetime tech support, you can give us a call. You're either going to talk to me, you're going to talk to Rick, you're going to talk to somebody that does this and knows exactly the next steps and can answer those questions. So make sure that you subscribe to Volunteer Audio. You're going to want to subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook for the latest in Harley audio. We're going to show you awesome installs, step-by-step videos, new products as it comes out, and even sometimes we're just going to show you how it works. And you're going to love watching all these videos, knowing about the product before you buy it so you make the right purchase the first time. All right, go ahead and like this video now. Click that button. That's going to move us up in search results. It's going to help other people find us, and it's free to use, so we thank you for doing it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, God bless.